Welcome to VidBits, brought to you by Premium Support at Symantec. My name is Nephi Perry, and I'm a Principal Technical Account Manager for Symantec. I'll be your host as we look at user credential management within VIP. We'll start this tour within VIP Manager, or the cloud portion of the VIP user management system. Next, we'll explore how the Symantec Enterprise Gateway, or EGW, can help facilitate user management. First, a quick overview of how VIP authentication works. Next, we'll look at a couple use cases for authentication out of the dozens of combinations available. Customers can use Symantec VIP to deploy strong authentication for enterprise applications, such as VPNs, as well as integrate strong authentication into custom applications, such as online web-based applications via the Symantec VIP Web Services APIs. Symantec VIP offers customers the ability to deploy strong authentication using standalone one-time password credentials, out-of-band authentication, and tokenless authentication. We'll quickly look at each now. As you can see in the graphic, each is broken up by category. So under standalone OTP credentials, Symantec VIP supports the use of hardware tokens, employing the OAuth standard, as well as a variety of proprietary OTP protocols, such as Vasco Digipass, RSA Secure ID, etc. In addition, Symantec VIP supports software-based credentials, such as OTP generator software, deployed in a wide variety of mobile or desktop devices. Finally, support for hardware-embedded OTP generation is available for devices using the Intel Identity Protection Technology, or IPT, available on second-generation Intel iCore chipsets. Next is the out-of-band category. Symantec VIP supports the use of SMS text messages, voice phone calls, or email to deliver server-generated one-time passwords to users without a dedicated OTP generator hardware or software device. The use case here would be a user, perhaps in a remote environment. They attempt to authenticate and are called, or they receive a text message on a phone number that they have registered under their user profile within the cloud. So the cloud would send that notification via email or text message or voice, and this is why we consider this an out-of-band authentication, because it's outside the normal usage of a credential. We rely on that user to have a profile within the cloud. That's an important note on the out-of-band authentications. Next is tokenless. Symantec VIP IA, or Intelligent Authentication, delivers strong authentication using a combination of device and behavior profiling. Device profiling and identification can be augmented with client software, allowing Symantec VIP Intelligent Authentication to leverage a device certificate or hardware-based identifier to provide a stronger assertion of a device's identity. Symantec VIP is built as a modular cloud-based service, thus enabling Symantec to continue to develop and deliver new authentication capabilities in the same platform. This ensures that customers can use a single unified authentication solution to leverage new authentication mechanisms as they're developed in response to emerging authentication threats. By way of comparison, we can look at the credential comparison chart on the screen now. This is broken up by credential type on the left, and then cost, portability, brandability, usability, and support costs across from left to right on the top. Because the software credentials are free, for example, the cost is nothing, which gives it an excellent rating. We'll pause on this chart for a moment to allow you to review these various options. Next, we'll look at a couple customer authentication processes within VIP. So, as you can see in the graphic, we start with a user on the left side. The user is going to access, in this example, the VIP Enterprise Gateway. Two fields will appear where the username and then a 6-digit code are going to be entered. In this use case, the customer will be inputting that OTP, or one-time password, to authenticate with VIP to access the protected resources you can see on the bottom right. The other important graphics here are the Symantec VIP services in the cloud, in the top center, and on the right on the center is the Enterprise Directory. In this case, it's going to be an LDAP or Active Directory of some kind. So the user inputs the username, then a 6-digit passcode, and the enterprise gateway passes that password or the first factor information to the enterprise directory for authentication. The enterprise directory responds in the affirmative, and that 6-digit passcode is then sent to the Symantec VIP services in the cloud for verification. The user is then granted access to the protected resources if and when that first factor authentication or the username and password and that 6-digit code are both authenticated together. That's your two-factor authentication. The second use case is a customer using push authentication with VIP. Again, same players. You can see the Symantec cloud services, the user directory, protected resources, and the gateway in the middle. We start with the user again on the left. The user inputs only the username, the first factor information. That's sent to the gateway for verification with the user directory. At that point, assuming that the user directory authenticates that individual with the first factor authentication, the gateway sends push data to the VIP services for a push notification to be sent to the user. Once the user receives that push notification, and assuming that they accept it, and it's through that authentication to the cloud after the push that the user is granted access to the protected resources they need. First, let's log into your VIP Manager console. You land first in the dashboard page. Today we're going to look at the Users page next. Under Users, you'll notice the various filter options on the left side. I'll scroll really quickly through those. You can see User State, User Information, Users, Credential Type, Credential State, Validation Within, and this is a time filter. So how far back you want to go is up to you. You can use a custom filter or just the last year or the last 6 months. You can check those radial buttons. Not validated within a certain period, and then the user groups allowed. In this field, you can search by the user ID or credential ID. If I type in 2 letters, like for example S and then A, it'll come up with various users that the filters show as having an S and an A in them. Because this is a test account, I'm willing to show some of the example users that we have. I'm going to go ahead and select Sam. Sam is a test user and does not have a credential set up. You can see if we click Edit Details that this user information will become much more granular. And we'll look at another example in a minute, but for this example, you can see there's a user ID. The state of the user is enabled, so there are 2 ways that a user can be locked out. One is the credential can be locked out or the user can be locked out. Under the Users tab, we see the user is locked out. So in this case, again, you can see the state of the user is enabled, the name of the user, and the group that they are associated with. There are no temporary security codes available for this user, no credentials, and no remembered devices. So we'll back out to the search results. This time we'll input just the letter S. Let's see what that returns. As you can see, there are several users for the letter S, so we'll just choose one that has something in the user state section, a credential. So again, we're going to choose Edit Details. For this individual, they have a user ID. Again, their state is enabled, so their user account is enabled, and this time they have a credential ID. So this credential ID is associated with a very specific credential. The type of credential is listed below, so VIP Access Desktop in this case, and again, here's your second enabled item. So in this case, this means that the credential is enabled, it is not locked out. You can edit this, so as a VIP manager, you can edit the state of this credential. So you can make it disabled, you can make it inactive. I'm not going to change the state of this credential, but you could choose to do that. This would be in a situation maybe where a help desk individual would receive a call from a user and say that that user perhaps has lost their phone and they would like their credential disabled for security reasons. Fantastic. You can go in here and disable that credential. So again, for today, we're not going to do that. It also shows when the credential was first registered. So this credential was added November 27th, 2017. Whenever you make changes to credentials, you're going to want to go ahead and hit Save to make sure that credential change is enabled. From here, you can also see we can add a new user. This would be a manual user. We're going to talk about automatically adding users through LDAP in a little bit, but you can add a user manually here. You could remove this user manually, and then you can actually add a credential down here. So you could add, we'll go ahead and look at that. So again, it's prompting us to save. We're going to go ahead and save even though we didn't make any changes. Notice the banner on the top says you have successfully edited the credential. This indicates that you have saved the credentials changes that you wanted to. So we'll go ahead and add a credential. In this case, we're going to add just a VIP credential. When you add a credential, you're going to want to actually physically see that credential ideally, or verify with the user, perhaps with a screenshot or otherwise, to ensure that you've got the right credential ID. You can name the credential anything you want. So in this case, I'm going to name it just a test credential because that's what we're doing today. So we'll say test. This happens to be on an iOS device, so I'm going to say iOS. And again, we're going to go ahead and click save. As you can see, quite a bit of information is filled in. So this credential ID is here. The name that I gave it is here. The type of credential, it knows what it is, so it fills that for us. The current state of the credential is enabled. This is a push-enabled device, so it has a special line here for the push enablement. Again, when it was registered, and it actually lets us know what the iOS of the device is, and the version of the client on the device. So this might be helpful information in troubleshooting with support if that ever becomes an issue for this user. Otherwise, it's information that admins have to help audit perhaps the iOS distribution or the client versions that they have on their environment. As always, it's helpful to look at the question marks if you have any questions about any of the fields that you're looking at in VIP Manager. In this case, we get a thorough explanation of what a credential ID is, the various extension options, what the friendly name is, etc. All the fields that you see to the left that have been filled in. We get a good explanation of what each of those are. Very helpful information. While we're here, let's talk about temporary security codes. Moving to policies, you can see if temporary security codes are enabled. On this account, towards the bottom, you can see temporary security code. The maximum validity period is 30 days, and the default validity period is 1 day. Now these are the defaults within Symantec VIP Manager. You can actually generate security codes that have shorter or longer durations than these defaults. As we've talked about in other videos, the VIP policy configuration page should be edited with extreme care. Changes made in this page will migrate to your production environment instantaneously. For example, if you don't have mobile push enabled and haven't tested it, it would be a good idea to test it before enabling it here. Changing any of these settings within VIP Manager could have adverse consequences if you haven't tested those settings in a test environment previously, or if you're changing the setting during a peak time of activity. Again, be very careful not to change these settings without following your proper internal change processes. For today, we're going to look at the settings, so we're going to click Edit. Again, we're just looking at the temporary security code validity periods, but you can change it to many days. By default, this one's set to 30 days, which is the maximum allowable within this interface. And the default validity period is 1 day. Again, using the question marks, we can see various helpful bits of information that show up on the right. For the validity periods, it's pretty straightforward info, but it can be helpful. So because this is enabled, again, we're going to go back to the users page. Because users can be given temporary security codes, this generate temporary security code option is available. If we click on it, we have options about how long, including as granularly as the time period. So for example, if you have a vendor that comes to your office and needs a security code for a week, you can end the validity of that security code at 5 p.m. on the Friday when they're supposed to leave. Generally, your expiration date should fall in line with how long you expect somebody to use that credential. You could certainly issue one day by day. That's also okay. It's really up to you and your management team. about what kind of validity you want. This will be a valid credential. They can access all of the items that they are allowed to access with this credential. So it is important to give it a timeline that makes sense. Generally, the usage is going to be multiple use, but in the event that you're helping a user get authenticated where they have a typical credential that they use and they just need to use it one time, it would be best practice to use the one-time use option. We're not going to generate a code today, but this is how you would do that. Notice that there are two sections, the credential section and the remember device section. This test account doesn't have remember devices enabled, but if it did and this individual had registered a remember device, it would show up here. Let's look at what a remember device is while we're talking about it. Again, we're going to look at policies. We're going to click on edit and scroll down. There are two types of remember devices. First type is a device fingerprint. Again, helpful information on the right if you want to read it as I'm working through this. The device fingerprint can be set to expire after a period of time or after no successful authentications. The default within these settings, as you can see in the middle of the screen, are for the credential to expire after 365 days or after no successful authentications for 90 days. There's a second type of remember device called a trusted device. I'll click the button and allow you to read on that a little bit while we're working on this one. Notice the two options on trusted device. First is to enable trusted device. This allows your users to register for a trusted device. The second button is an auto upgrade. We had a 1.12 version of the trusted device called a remembered computer. This allows users to seamlessly auto upgrade their remembered device when a new update comes out. Enabling this should be done with care because it's always important to test new software within your environment prior to having a broad-reaching launch of that same software. We generally default to a no for this setting, but because this is a test environment, it has been enabled to yes. Notice the maximum allowable devices. You can choose 1 to 20 remembered devices allowable per person. Okay, with that, let's look back at the users page. A couple important notes about the users page. You can look at any credentials that are registered to a user in this page. So you could search, for example, we'll copy this credential ID and we'll paste it in this field. This will show up and you'll notice that the user ID is what shows up here. Let's look at how that search functionality is different within the Credentials tab. Notice how the format is somewhat different. The credential is on the left side, where in the user page, the user is on the left side. Every credential registered in the VIP Cloud instance will show up in your Credential tab. Be aware that sometimes that means that your credentials will not be tied to users for various reasons. The Credentials tab will show all credentials that have been registered and have not been removed within your organization. Inactive credentials can be removed on a timeline or manually by the administrators of VIP. Again, we'll look at policies to see where that setting is set. Notice at the top, the fourth section down called Credential Expiration. You can set credentials to expire at your whim. You could have it set to never expire or after no successful authentications after 180 days, or whatever makes sense. Another important thing to notice is that there is always going to be a different result for your total credentials and your total users. Notice on this screen we have 17 credentials registered on this test account. Notice on the users page that we have far more results, in this case 35 results. This indicates that we have more users registered than we have credentials registered to those users. This may lead you to wonder which users don't have credentials. First, let me also just say that I don't want to get too far into the granularity of the search functionality within the VIP Manager's user page. But for example, we can look at users without a credential. This might be an important filter to apply depending on how you want to manage your account. This results in 17 user accounts without credentials registered. This is what we'd expect comparing the credential page and the user page. Many administrators prefer to export the contents of these search results to a CSV file where they can manipulate and manage this data more dynamically. This is definitely a helpful tool to help you manage your user base. With that information in mind, let's move on to the VIP Enterprise Gateway. The VIP Enterprise Gateway is the core component to connecting enterprise applications such as a VPN to the VIP service. The VIP Enterprise Gateway is deployed within your enterprise and sits between your Radius-enabled application, your enterprise LDAP directory, and the VIP services in the cloud. The purpose of this component is to accept authentication requests over Radius, perform a validation check of the username and password on the request against the LDAP directory, and then, if that check is successful, validate the one-time password also included in what requests against the VIP service. The result of this validation check is communication via the Radius to the signal to the enterprise application whether or not the user should be granted access to protected resources. For a select set of applications that do not support Radius, Symantec provides plugins to allow those applications to integrate with the VIP Enterprise Gateway. VIP Enterprise Gateway also provides users with a simple mechanism to authenticate to the VIP self-service portal using their enterprise credentials. We haven't discussed the self-service portal in this video yet, but essentially it's a portal whereby users can access their credentials, manage their credentials, add credentials, etc. without help from the VIP administrator in your enterprise. Let me first note that the VIP Enterprise Gateway is optional. You are not required to have one to utilize VIP, but it does come with some very helpful tools, especially in smaller deployments, that can help VIP be enabled most effectively in your environment. Today we're just going to look at the user store within the VIP Enterprise Gateway. If you're curious about how to download and install Enterprise Gateway, we have another video within Premium Support explaining how to do that and how to update it to the most current version. Please see that video before continuing if you're curious and want to follow along on your own Enterprise Gateway. Today we're going to look at the user store. As we work through the Enterprise Gateway, it will be helpful to follow along in the VIP Install and Configuration Guide. To access this guide, go to the VIP Manager, choose the Account tab, and then on the Link section on the right, choose Download Files. Next, navigate to the Enterprise Gateway, and then the most current version, at 9.8. At the top, you'll see the VIP EG98 Install and Config Guide. Click on that, and then navigate to the LDAP Directory Synchronization Service. I don't want anybody to be intimidated by this process, but it is a longer process to work through and troubleshoot than this video will allow today. Today we'll do a high-level overview of the options available within the user store interface. Generally, this is going to be an LDAP user store. You're going to identify the name, the connection, the host, the port, timeout, whether you want to use an SSL connection, and then you're going to have bind information as well as search criteria. Notice the user filter. You can set up various user groups within your LDAP to migrate into VIP as desired. We consider it best practice when possible to sync your LDAP with your VIP services. Now, why is this? Generally speaking, your Active Directory is maintained with a high degree of accuracy. This is important for the overall security of your company, and all we're doing with an LDAP sync is piggybacking those efforts made by your Active Directory administrator. In essence, if they keep things up to date on their end, VIP Manager will also keep things up to date for your VIP access. The reason this works is because Active Directory is queried for each transaction that VIP attempts to make. Using the up-to-date information from Active Directory, VIP then can authenticate or decline transaction requests from users. Using the LDAP sync functionality, VIP admins can easily manage their user base without having to manually remove and add users. I cannot stress enough how helpful this is if you can implement this from the get-go. If you have a current VIP implementation and haven't set up LDAP, we would encourage you to do so. Once the user store has been set up, you can choose the LDAP directory synchronization. Again, we'll go through this in another video, but essentially, this ensures that you're communicating with LDAP properly. You can test your connection here, manage your VIP certificates, etc. Moving back to the VIP Manager interface, if you use the Enterprise Gateway, you wouldn't be adding and removing users from this interface. You would let your LDAP sync do this process for you. A VIP administrator who uses LDAP sync would come into these pages to manage anything to do with the credentials, including unlocking them in a situation where the user has locked their credential, unlocking the user account in a situation where the user has locked their user account, or again, potentially generating temporary security codes, or editing other details that might be necessary in troubleshooting. And with that, we want to thank you for joining us on this tour of user and credential management within VIP. We appreciate your time viewing this video and hope that it's been helpful for you. Look for more videos about VIP and our other cybersecurity offerings brought to you by Symantec Premium Support. Have a great day!